Every year, I make Easter cards for a service that delivers meals to homebound seniors. And due to the kind of anonymous nature of who these cards are going to, I keep them pretty general in a springtime theme. But I want to share with you how to create a solid base for Easter cards and then show you a couple of ideas of how to add more details to specific recipients. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty, where I create with paper and photos in artful ways. I'm going to be working with the letterpress system from Spellbinders, and I'm going to be using this press plate, which is a part of a program that Spellbinders offers to retail stores where you can sign up for this year-long program and get a new press plate every month. And this is called the Better Press Society. I have seen some of these online, so it may not be limited to brick and mortar stores, which are very rare these days, but there may be online shops that offer them as well. I can put all the links down below for you. But remember, you do not have to have a press plate system to do this. Any larger stamp or even a background stamp you can do this with. All right, I am going to be working with a variety of cardstock, including the specific press plate cardstock as well as just ordinary cardstock. I have an ombre ink pad, but don't worry, if you don't have an ombre ink pad, you can do this with other ink pads. Cubes are great for this, but feel free to use larger ink pads if that's what you have. Now, I don't think that Hero ombre pad is available anymore, and my cubes are from Concord and Ninth, which is my favorite current ink brand, but whatever you have will work. All right, if you've never used the Better Press system, which, like I said, I'm fairly new to this, you have to tape your cardstock down to this lid piece, and then your press plate magnetizes down to this bottom piece. And there's names for these, but I don't quite remember what they are. Both the bottom plate and the top plate have measurements for you to align things, and I've just kind of centered my press plate into the A2 zone there, and I have put my cardstock onto the A2 zone on the lid of the plate, so everything is aligned. Now, this system works on these spring magnets, so when you add your lid to it, it won't touch the ink until you run it through a die cut machine. All right, speaking of ink, I've started inking up my plate, and this is why the ombre pads are really nice, because you can get lots of color in just a couple of swipes across. I try to keep, specifically with this color, I keep the green not touching the purple because that can make a muddy color. Now you can see that springy action goes on, and when you run it through your die cut machine, it presses down those springs and presses the cardstock into the plate to transfer the color. At the same time, it also puts an indentation into the paper, and that's all dependent on how thick your paper is and kind of the soft texture of the paper, and that's why they've manufactured their own. What's beautiful about this system is that, much like stamp platforms, it keeps things aligned. So if you've missed a spot, like I did here, you can redo it. So I just added some more ink on a place that was under inked, and I ran it through my machine again without moving anything. As long as you don't move anything, it will still be aligned. And then you can lift it back off, and now that flower that was a little spotchy before has full coverage. So hopefully you can see how this press plate technique very easily translates over to a stamping platform and stamping technique. Here is what the base of this particular project is going to be with the press plate. Now, this does get messy if you're using larger ink pads. It gets kind of messy even with the cubes, but it is fairly easy to clean off. I just spray some water down and then give it a scrub. And I only do this if I'm switching colors or if I'm done for the day. But really, a rag and a spray bottle of water and you're good to go. So here I am using the cubes. If you're using larger individual colors of ink, you're going to want to kind of tip the ink onto an edge and then gently tap that edge onto a zone of your press plate until you're happy with the coverage. Cubes give you a lot more control over this, although I am very careful not to press my ink pads into different color families. So here I'm using greens and reds, and red and pink are one color family, and the greens and blues are another color family. So I don't want to press my ink pads like my red into the green or vice versa, because that will start cross-contaminating the ink pad. Now, if it does happen to you, what I usually do is just tap off that ink pad onto a scratch piece of paper right away, because usually that cross-contamination is just on the surface of the pad, but if you let it sit, it might soak in deeper. But usually if you do this right away, you can just kind of tap off and remove and eliminate that cross-contamination. All right, if you don't want to get these ink pads too close together, there are ways that you can leave a little bit of a gap in between your colors and then kind of cross over with that gap. So here I am inking up my greens and then kind of a bluey green color there, but I left a space in between I'm doing the red now, but I do leave a space in between that bluey green color right above the red. And I just pull out any kind of blending tool and I just kind of tap that color into place. You can even add a little extra of whatever color of ink to your blending tool as you tap, and that will add that color in and kind of bridge that gap without intermixing the colors too much, because if you mix red with green, you're going to get kind of a muddy color. So here it was a very light blend between those two, and that's partially because my ink pads are running low on ink, so I do recommend refreshing your ink pads with re-inkers before you start working on these big batch style project. And yes, I am making a big batch of these cards because, like I said, they're going out to a specific senior service and they usually need about 30 cards at Easter time. All right, I have got my ink pads all inked up. I am very careful to make sure that I don't mix up the re-inker color with the ink pad color, because I have done that before and then you really got a mess. All right, just so you can see, my freshly inked ink pads are the card on the left there, and my drier ink pads are the card on the right. So having your tools fresh and ready to go makes a big difference in your final product and the frustration you might have along the way. At any rate, when I am done creating for a session, I do clean everything up with a little bit of alcohol, because some inks will clean up better with alcohol than with water. And yes, these inks are going to stain things, including your base platform, possibly your lid, and even your press plates. But that just means you're using them and you're doing what is intended to be done with them. So having messy looking plates isn't a bad thing. It's just stains. And just a quick aside, if you are doing this with stamps, don't use alcohol on your stamps, because that will dry out the stamp material and ruin your stamps. All right, moving on, I am going to create my sentiments, and I've already started this process, but I've lined up this particular sentiment so that I can use the press plate to get 6 sentiments on the same card, and then I will be able to die cut them out later. I believe it just says wishing you a beautiful spring or something along those lines. At any rate, I have put a little bit of tape down on the base platform, and that's not going to hurt anything going through here. And you can see through the backside of thinner cardstock to where the images are pressing, and I just align the bottom of that image with the piece of tape that I've put down. And that way I can align this and get a total of 6 phrases on a single panel. I do have to make sure that I line it up so that you don't bump into those springs at all. But once I get this done, I've got the first 3 sides done, and then you just rotate the paper and do the other side. It will be upside down text-wise, but since you're just die cutting them out, it really doesn't matter. And then I've got a larger die cut machine with my Gemini 2, and I don't remember if I mentioned, I thought the press plate system would fit through my Gemini 2 die cutting machine, but it does not. So you've got to use a manual die cutter, and I pulled out my trusty old Sizzix manual for this, and yes, it does work in that. You don't have to have the Spellbinder system for this. All right, as I was saying, I can fit both of these die cut pieces of paper on here, even if they're overhanging the plates, because my Gemini 2 takes 8.5 by 11 size plates. These ones are smaller plates, but like I said, it will fit through. You might need to die cut these separately if your plates are smaller than this. Now, you don't have to have this window feature to create these cards. You can use a regular background stamp, or maybe you're using a stamp like a bouquet of flowers. You could just set that off to like the left or right hand side and create your design element that way. Because I have a window, I am going to go ahead and pop mine up on some foam adhesive, and that will give me another detail that I can add some inking to the background to create a little bit of a sky, and then that will be some grounding for my sentiment phrase to nestle in the window and sit on top of the sky color. I want to show you some of the other options that I've talked about, but let's finish up this particular card first, and then we'll get to those options. All right, I do kind of set the window in place on my card base and put the sentiment in place to kind of see where I want to start inking this, because when I put my ink blending tool down, it's going to create a large darker area, and I want to hide that behind the sentiment. And then I just softly blend the ink out to the rest of the area that will be showing through the window. And then I go ahead and get my sentiment attached and my card front panel attached. Now I should do those in different orders so that my sentiment does not get overlapped by some of the flowers, which it did a little bit here. So you can stop at this stage, but I like to add just a little bit more pizzazz to these. I have this glitter pen. It's from Lone Fawn. I believe this one's been discontinued, but any glittery product that you might have, like a Wink of Stella pen, or I just found out that there's Jelly Roll clear glitter pens. I think I'm going to pick up one of those. Or even something like Nuvo Drops, which I do bring in to add some drop dimension in just a little bit. But I am adding a little bit of glitter over just the top of my flowers. And then I'm going to pull in that Nuvo that I mentioned, and I believe this one is Crystal Clear. No, it is White Blizzard. So it is a mostly clear base with a very mild glitter to it. And I'm going to create some enameled dot style embellishments and be able to make them the size and placement that I want with this Nuvo Drops. With that, the foundation of this card is done, and I'm going to send these out as is, but I did want to show you some of those examples using stamps instead, or mixing it up for somebody who is Christian and wants to celebrate Easter from a religious perspective, or maybe something for kids who want the Easter Bunny and Easter eggs. So let's start off with a stamping example. Here you can see I used a flower bouquet, set off to the left, changed up my sentiment to say Happy Easter, and then grounded that sentiment with the blue sky technique and some Nuvo Drops. So for card number 3 here, I have die cut out a cross and tucked it amongst the flowers and changed up the sentiment to help someone who celebrates the Easter season from their religious point of view rather than a cultural point of view. And for card number 4 here, we're going with the fun cultural elements of Easter with Easter bunnies and Easter eggs. And you can tuck these little guys around the card, same design, just adding extra onto this. And if you're giving this to a kid, you could even hide those little Easter eggs here and there on the card, and even on the inside and on the back of the card, and they can enjoy a little Easter egg hunt. That is what I have to share with you today. Hopefully you got something useful out of this video. I will be back in a few days with some more crafty videos for you. So until then, I hope you have an artful day.